triste me pongo, estoy tan enamorado de la negra Tomasa, que cuando se va de casa, qué triste me pongo. Ay, 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 esa negra linda que me echó mi loco, esa negra linda cámara que me echó mi loco. Mamá que me gusta la comida, que me cocina, mamá que me gusta la café, que ella me cuela. Ay, 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 esa negra linda que me echó mi loco, esa negra linda cámara que me echó mi loco, más linda que como cocina esa mulatica, como cocina esa niña, Kikiribu, Mandinga, Kikiribu, a los amigos de California le damos la bienvenida, Kikiribu, Mandinga, Kikiribu, Mandinga, sean bienvenidos hoy aquí en la bulería, Kikiribu, Mandinga, Kikiribu, Mandinga, esta es Cubita la bella, esta es mi tierra querida, Kikiribu, Mandinga, Kikiribu, Mandinga, cocina como mamina, que yo me como hasta la vida, Kikiribu, Mandinga, Kikiribu, Mandinga, que me gusta la café, ay, ella me muera, Kikiribu, Mandinga, Kikiribu, Mandinga, que me gusta la comida, que me cocina, Kikiribu, Mandinga, Kikiribu.
Hi, I'm Steve Plate, and I'll be your host for this edition of the BTS Present Show. Tonight we'll be talking about Cuba. Colorful, unique, beautiful, and amazing. And I'm really happy to have two guests who are not only familiar with Cuba, but very knowledgeable about today's Cuba and its history. I welcome Drew Lewis, and Marissa Ramirez. Welcome, Marissa.
Hi.
We do have some short clips we're going to be showing, so let's take a look at that, and then we'll come back and we'll talk more about Cuba.
First films of Cuban rebel leader Fidel Castro and his ragged force in their mountain stronghold, made shortly before fighting erupted in all 6 of Cuba's provinces. This is the band, numbered at about 1,000, that for 16 months has held out in the rugged Sierra Maestre mountains near the island's eastern tip. Ill-supplied, they make many of their weapons in crude jungle workshops. Mines and grenades made here have proved as unreliable as they are makeshift. One of Castro's most potent weapons has been the mimeograph. Pronouncements and propaganda have circulated throughout Cuba by pamphlets and by radio, despite secret police efforts to stamp out the underground. Castro himself has become a figure of legend in the 16 months since he invaded Oriente province from a small boat. The rebels' actual achievements were few for most of that time, but by mere existence and survival, Castro's force has both grown and exerted an influence out of all proportion to its size. Castro's plan of action? To fight by any means until the Batista regime is toppled. Sabotage proved effective in paralyzing Oriente province for weeks before the general outbreak of fighting. But Oriente is the province most remote from the heart of the country. The ragged, underfed, poorly armed rebels cut off communications and supply lines in a campaign of sniping and sabotage. But every time they have clashed in the open with Batista's hard, efficient army and national police, the rebels have lost heavily. Despite losses, they have fought on, and their numbers grow. Today, an estimated 1 man in 10 carries a modern rifle. The United States has embargoed arms for both sides. Occasional shipments are smuggled through from rebel sympathizers. It is an unequal battle of idealists against tough professional forces. Says Castro, if I lose, I'll start over again. If Batista loses, he loses for good. Cuba's strongman, who appeared with his family at a press reception, seemed untroubled by Castro's mounting offensive. Behind Batista stand the army, the police, and apparently Cuba's labor unions, who withheld support from Castro's general strike call. Batista seemed upset about reports in the American press of police brutality and corruption, but confident in the face of an unpredictable future. Castro marks the second anniversary of his revolution with the biggest military parade ever staged in Cuba, featuring tanks and other heavy weapons from Russia and Red Czechoslovakia. Shortly afterwards, Castro demanded the United States Embassy drastically reduce its staff to 11 persons. It was the last straw in his long campaign of provocation and harassment. President Eisenhower broke off diplomatic relations with a message read by Press Secretary Haggerty.
There is a limit to what the United States in self-respect can endure. That limit has now been reached. Our friendship for the Cuban people is not affected. It is my hope and my conviction that in the not-too-distant future, it will be possible for the historic friendship between us once again to find reflection in normal relations of every sort. Meanwhile, our sympathy goes out to the people of Cuba, now suffering under the yoke of a dictator.
In 1962, world peace was threatened by the most critical period in history since the end of the war. Red puppet Castro and the Russians turned Cuba into an island fortress, and U.S. planes spotted missile installations aimed at key points in the Western Hemisphere. Planes brought back evidence that moved the Organization of American States and the Western Allies to back President Kennedy unanimously when he declared an arms blockade of Cuba and laid down an ultimatum.
To halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, will, if found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back.
In the face of U.S. determination, the Soviets dismantled their missiles and bombers and shipped them home. It was the retreat to Moscow. The democracies had served notice on the Russians that any aggressive threat in the Western Hemisphere would not be tolerated.
This is obviously a historic meeting. The history between the United States and Cuba is obviously complicated, and over the years a lot of mistrust has developed. But during the course of the last several months, there have been contacts between the U.S. and the Cuban government, and in December, as a consequence of some of the groundwork that had been laid, both myself and President Castro announced a significant change in policy and the relationship between our two governments. I think that after 50 years of a policy that had not changed on the part of the United States, it was my belief that it was time to try something new, that it was important for us to engage more directly with the Cuban government and the Cuban people. And as a consequence, I think we are now in a position to move on a path towards the future and leave behind some of the circumstances of the past that have made it so difficult, I think, for our countries to communicate.
Drew, tell us a little bit about your engagement with Cuba.
In 1999, I heard about Global Exchange opening up a tour of Cuba, and so I immediately jumped on it.
And of course, Marissa, tell us about your engagement with Cuba.
Drew was telling me about this program that is offering scholarships on a global basis. It's to attend the University of Elam and become a certified MD, and you go back to wherever you came from, and you're returning your services to places in poverty. So I was so blown away by that. The more I learned about the culture, it's just amazing. The history's rich.
We're fortunate to have some slides you brought. So let's start with some of those slides, and you can tell us something about Cuba.
The airport actually was so unusual, colorful, unique to the eye. And
built by the Canadians.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Canadian government built it. It was a gift to Cuba.
And this is in the neighborhoods here, I guess?
In the suburbs, yeah.
Suburbs,
so you have a mixture of like rich homes, old homes, colorful homes. This is a mansion that was actually
turned into a school.
Exactly.
After the dictator's henchmen left the country, they turned the mansions of the rich into healthcare centers and schools and hospitals. That's a Hotel Havana Libre.
Yeah, full of art, lots of history as well. The revolutionaries actually took over this hotel to prepare for battle. So there's lots of pictures around. University of Havana.
Ah, okay.
Overlooking Havana itself. And we walked onto the campus, and it was pretty cool because we saw this giant tank right there.
Because of the revolution, educational opportunity were spread throughout Cuba, and that's
Yeah.
a reminder of that.
And turn the weapon of the dictator into fruits of education for the people of Cuba.
That's a wonderful metaphor.
Yeah.
Colorful, again, and unique artwork.
Yeah.
You were saying it's everywhere.
Yeah, murals everywhere.
Yeah. All the forms of transportation takes you through.
The Vidado district, it's one of the oldest districts in Cuba.
So it was this old factory that they ended up making to this art warehouse, and they showed, all kinds of work in this gallery. And you can get a nice mojito.
I'm all for that.
It was quite the art. It was pretty profound. This certain gallery was big on illuminating voices that were unheard. That's a bunch of negatives, profiles, people's profiles. Old and young, they're totally starting to unite and become very prominent voice. And Mequinas, you can pay about 50 cents to take a ride anywhere you want.
A Mequina is a Cuban 50s vehicle that they've used as a taxi. So you see these classic Cuban 1950s cars being used as taxis, and you can go ride in one for 50 cents.
And I think you were saying that the engines in these wore out years ago, and now they're powered by
Russian tractor.
Russian tractor.
It's kind of funny.
Is this indicative of a lot of the architecture there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The kind of columns and.
There's every imaginable architecture.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's so diverse.
Who's this here?
Pineapple. He's the pineapple man. I call him Pineapple Man. He's just standing on the side of the park and ready to sell you fresh pineapple.
That's
I'm walking through the suburbs again. So much art inside people's yards, everywhere.
And murals everywhere. It's
Guarapera. It's fresh sugarcane juice.
Oh, really?
Yes. I tried some, and it's delicious.
Yeah?
It's unusual. It kind of tastes like sugar water in a way, except it's really fresh, and you can taste the root inside there. And you just watch them grind it for you right in the spot. It's
now,
like
is sugarcane still part of the economic base?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, this is wonderful slides. I'm so glad that you brought these. These are great.
It was quite the adventure.
Yes, I should say.
Yeah, I went around riding in the Mequinas, left and right. Drew's been there 12 times before, so he's not fazed, but I'm looking at it with eyes wide open and dilated. And we ended up running into a carriage tour guide and took a horse carriage around the entire city. And people are extremely patriotic. Fidel Castro with a party of people thanking them for their service. And Odelkis, actually, I met her and she assisted me in my journey.
She's the person in the center there. The
woman.
Okay.
To the left of the man, she is an art professor and a tank commander. One of the many very diverse and strong women in Cuba. There's this one section of Havana Viejo called Baro Chino, which is where I got that awesome pina colada. The art there, I'm an artist myself, so I just took so much appreciation to everything. You have art in Havana Viejo, galleries everywhere, in the street.
You're living in a museum of art.
It is a museum of art, that's for sure. On the buses too.
The
That's a
Pastors for
caravan,
Peace,
caravan bus for Pastors for Peace. And then sometimes after all of that, you just gotta take a break and meditate.
They have one of the most highly educated populations in the world. In fact, Cuba has more doctors than any other country on the planet, and they actually export doctors to other countries. They even offer scholarships to American students.
But we were talking about how important culturally their history is.
In every way possible. I mean, you have art manifested in history and monuments of Castro and murals of Che Guevara everywhere. And these were very important figures of the revolution.
And here we're talking about the Musée de Révolution. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's like walking through a storybook. This small army with all the odds against them and how they victoriously won over and over and over again. And this was one of Batista's old palaces.
History is a main aspect of Cuban culture.
And here's some pictures. Now these are
Women's Battalion. They had whole battalions of women dedicated to fighting for their rights in the revolution.
When Fidel was in power, his right-hand woman was telling him he needs to include the women's right in the revolution.
Strong advocate for women's rights and respecting women. So she had his ear all the time.
You were saying that's one of the kind of the transformations between the Batista regime and Fidel Castro coming to power is kind of the liberation and encouragement of women to become educated, to pursue professions, to do the things that they certainly have the abilities and the desire to do.
And they became such an asset because of that. It was a huge discovery for Cuba because they didn't have any opportunities to do so before. The grandmas inside there.
Is that right?
Yep.
Now this is still the Museo de la Revolución here?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was huge.
Oh yeah, that's a transmitter that the revolutionaries used. They were very inventive and ingenious in using whatever they had to fight with one of the most well-equipped dictators in the Americas.
Yeah.
That's Che Guevara and Camilo Cienfuegos statues of them in the jungle.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That was in the
reenacting
museum.
the battle. And you can get an idea of how large scale this palace was. There's a little art reenactment of the grandma. Pretty incredible, very colorful. It's very Cuba.
Anyway, back to now what were you calling these again?
Mequinas.
Mequinas. Okay.
Yeah, Cuba.
On the beach.
Swam in the Caribbean Ocean. It was so warm. It's amazing in so many ways because the food, the flan.
That's the flan.
That's the flan. It was perfect.
Yeah.
And you got some street art, some sculptures. This was my personal favorite. Looked like it was made out of coral right next to Malecon.
Yeah, the world's largest rolling collection of 50s vehicles on the planet.
And a more modern take on what we see today. There's a little bit more money put into this part of town, and of course the cars. So everything just looks like candy, eye candy.
And now this is Havana.
This is Havana Viejo. Yeah, this is Parque Central, and to the left is the ballet.
What is that right there?
Hotel Inglaterra.
And how large a city geographically is Havana? Is it pretty spread out and it has various districts?
Yeah, it's it's the second largest, well, I think it is the largest city in Cuba. And yeah, it's very quite spread out.
It's kind of hard to keep up right around the Mequinas everywhere. I love this video because I was personally making so many connections, like, wow. Many things have not changed. Like, you see the taxi sign in the Mequina, there's still taxi signs there. And it's the same idea. The jaywalkers, it was like a national sport. Yeah. And the use of their horn there was interesting. Like, their custom is, I'm honking the horn because I'm coming, I'm not stopping. Not like I'm angry or anything, but, you know, an American's like
Get out of my
throwing
way.
a tantrum with the horn. That's what it really means.
Now, in Havana, do you see many people from other countries?
Oh yeah, it's definitely an
Is there a kind
international.
of diverse visitor population?
Yeah. Just even like visiting the medical universities during my visit, you've had people from like Africa and Spain, like all around the world in one spot. It is a hot spot, you know.
Yeah, that's why they put a lot of emphasis on art, because it's a conference center for all over the world. People come for conferences and meetings and activities, and so it's like that's the reason why you see so much art there.
Right.
It's a lot of...
So amazing, so rich. And it embodies in many different ways too. You know, you'll have murals, you'll have separate artists, you'll have galleries, and
now, does the government encourage the creation of large-scale murals or kind of outdoor art exhibits and that kind of thing?
it's more like a celebration, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they subsidize art tremendously, and also they subsidize keeping those old 50s classic American cars running. They consider those old cars a national treasure.
Yeah.
So they help the people that own the cars. They run them as taxis, and people can actually earn a living for their family by keeping that car running and driving tourists around and stuff, guiding, you know, as tour guides and stuff. So it's really a very valuable asset for the economy.
And you were saying also, as a practical matter, it's a lot easier to get to Cuba if I or John or Brian or Gail or somebody wanted to take a trip to Cuba. For us now, it's a lot easier to make that connection than it has been in the past.
Oh,
much easier. Yeah, you can book all your flights on the internet, and you can charge it on a credit card, so it's much easier. In fact, I've read that a number of carriers are now struggling to get their acts together because they're expecting a tremendous tidal wave of tourists coming from the United States.
Yeah, it's already happened. I mean, I'm also seeing that around the world, everywhere except America has been visiting Cuba.
Interesting. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And you're also saying that you're able to get a 4-course meal for $14, including tip. Yeah.
Including tip, yeah, which was like 1 peso per person as a tip. It was the best food in town. Him and I ended up going like every day, twice a day.
It's also organic because they don't have the money to buy pesticides.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
oh, interesting. Well,
it's
great.
all organic food, yeah.
Now we have another slide here. Now what is this here?
This is actually one of many unique umbrellas that Cubans love to buy. There's a series of artists that make their prints onto umbrellas, so you'll see the most artistic fashion there too. And it's amazing because the food on top of that.
There's your dinner.
That was our first meal there.
Cuban meal.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Oh.
a classic Cuban meal: black beans, rice, salad, fish, and fried potatoes.
So now,
It's
does the
weird.
government encourage small business? For
that's a
instance,
new-
conversion of residences or spare space into a small business of some kind?
Yeah, now that Raul has become president, he's helped to push the changes in the government, and they're granting licenses now for private small businesses to start engaging in the economy. So they're pulling back the typical massive state-operated parts of the economy, and they're encouraging and stimulating small businesses. And it seems to be working really well.
Well, they need it. You know, there's a huge struggle to even survive in general. So the fact that people are really pushing for this, you know, why not?
Well, I think any government that encourages the entrepreneur, you know, the inventive side of people, as we're talking about, you know, the creative, you know, the colorful, the unique, you know, all the things that Cuba is,
Such a
and
show.
allowing them to be able to express that, you know, is just sound policy, my view anyway.
Yeah,
So, now
and
what
it's
is this here?
interesting. Cuba has stories all the way from the buildings to the streets to the people, and some good, some not so good. This is a photo of the house, the
We were staying
bathroom.
in,
Yeah. And this is Havana Viejo. I would say Havana Viejo as old Havana, but also new Havana,
Right.
because they're putting so much money into this. It's like a tourist vortex.
Well,
Yeah, very colorful.
it's amazingly so. Now, it's one thing we haven't talked about, of course, there was a picture of a church. They still have quite a few of the churches and cathedrals there.
Oh yeah, well, they're
Some of the oldest as
they're
well.
World,
Yeah.
They're world heritage sites.
Uh-huh.
Some of them are like 500 years old.
Oh, is that
you know?
right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like some of the first buildings in the Americas is in Cuba.
Yeah, they even have the second largest Christ monument in Cuba.
Is that right?
Yeah, I actually saw it. Unfortunately, that was the day I decided not to bring my camera. Yeah.
Certainly, what's striking to me is the diversity of the architectural types. You know, there's just all different
Yeah.
kinds of architecture.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
all over the place.
And now we're starting to learn of this because
Oh,
we're
that's one of
opening
the
it up.
churches
And there's a
there.
little Coco, my personal favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a three-wheeled taxi.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
And the train station right here, which gives you an idea of like most forms of transportation available while you're in Cuba. You can go on a train, take a 24-hour train out to Santiago, or a cab, Mequina, a horse, which you can see in the corner.
Or BC taxi. That's Jose Marti's house. He's one of the. He fought in the war against Spain in 1898. He's kind of like the George Washington of Cuba.
Yeah, prolific author.
And there we are again, you know, colorful, unique, beautiful, and amazing. As are all of these slides and the film clips that we're seeing here. It's just fascinating in its diversity and its beauty. Are you planning now to complete your studies at Cabrillo and then move on to Cuba, hopefully for some medical studies? That's kind of what's in the future for you?
That is in the future for sure. I was so blown away by Cuba, it's hard to stay away at this point. But I'm also taking some time to enrich my education and passion for medicine, because what I'm seeing over there is that they take a unique approach to it. You know, they're really connecting the dots in how they view the body and how they take care of the body.
Interesting.
Yeah, but we'll be studying there.
Well, I certainly think the medical profession everywhere, particularly in the United States, could stand more in contact with the human side of medicine, which sometimes they seem to forget. But maybe that will be different in your studies. And Drew, you're thinking about another trip soon? What's on the horizon for you? You've been how many times now?
I've been into Cuba about 12 times in the last 15 years. First time was in 1999, and I just fell in love with the place and started adopting Cuban families right and left.
For goodness sake. Now, was there some opportunity while you were there to travel out into the countryside, or did you have any desire to do that?
That's where the beach was, actually.
Yeah.
We had to drive out about 20 minutes, and it was beautiful, so luscious. It looked like that perfect tropical scene. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for being part of this BTS Presents show. And really giving us an opportunity to learn a lot more about Cuba, and particularly get a feeling for it through your adventures and your association with it. So, Drew Lewis, thank you so much for being here with us. It's been a pleasure to see you again. Marissa Ramirez, a pleasure to meet you, and best of luck in the future in all of your endeavors.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll all meet in Cuba and have one of those mojitos.
Yeah.
This has been Steve Plaich. Thanks for watching this edition of the BTS Presents show. Thanks.